Thanks, Concorda. Tánaiste, you say that the PwC report gives us a clear explanation of what happened here. I don't agree. Children's hospital problems are about construction contracts, cost management, cost measurement, general construction. I wonder why you gave a crowd of accountants who know nothing about construction the job of reviewing it. Why didn't you get a construction and procurement lawyer with international experience and a top professional quantity surveying team from outside the state? Were you afraid that you mightn't like the answer? At the introduction to the report, PwC say the scope of our work was limited to a review of documentary evidence made available to us and interviews with selected stakeholders and project personnel. We have taken reasonable steps to check the accuracy of information provided to us, but we have not independently verified all of the information provided to us relating to the services. Not to talk about the stuff they didn't get. This is not an independent report. They're saying it themselves. Now, you're calling this a special project. Well, actually, it's not a very special project. It's a construction project. It's not unique. Hospitals get built every year across Europe, and it doesn't justify an extra 450 million. The report says that the board should be less reliant on external advisors. Well, if you're going to hire consultants and pay them, maybe you might hold them to account. I'm sure they have professional indemnity. I'd be very surprised if they hired consultants who didn't have it. If the legals gave poor advice, they should be held to account. What was the legal advice regarding the contract? How did the board deal with the legal advice? The likes of Tim Berger-Hayes and Tom Costello were put on the board for their professional competence. Were they competent? The Taoiseach talks of cost of delays, higher building standards, knock-on effect of VAT. Tánaiste, delays and changes are meant to be managed. That's what people are paid for. There's always risks involved. But you transfer the risk onto the contractor. The contractor builds that into his price. Why did the price go up? Construction costs have gone up, but not by 450 million. And the scary part is that we're only at the start of it. We haven't got to the complicated part yet. Listen, it's gone up. And it's out of proportion, and you don't know where it's going, you don't know where it's going to land, you don't know what it's going to finally cost, because you have the wrong contract in place and you are refusing to revisit it. It's a terrible mistake, Tánaiste, not to revisit this. PwC say that you shouldn't revisit it on page 25 of the report, and that it wouldn't make sense. But you know what? They gave us no evidence to back it up. There was no analysis of why it wouldn't make sense to revisit it. They also told us that retendering the works would also require the replacement contractor to take on the basement and subconstruction works, and that it would create a number of contractual legal challenges. Oh no, it wouldn't. That's nonsense. Tánaiste, if I was building a 100-storey building and I'd subcontract the piler, right? The piles would go in. I wouldn't be putting them in. Someone else would be putting them in. But I get them tested independently. That's what you do with piles, right? And another thing, they'd have professional indemnity to back up where they were coming from. This doesn't make any sense, Tánaiste. You need to revisit this. This is ridiculous.
Tánaiste. Deputy, I don't think anybody is defending the process that was followed here, because it's clearly resulted in a whole series of failings that have been pointed out in this report. The issue is what do we do about it now? I don't believe, having read this report, that we can reduce the cost of rebuilding building a national children's hospital by retendering at this stage. I know you contest that, and you've been consistent on that, and I respect that. But you know, they specifically tried to deal with this issue in this report. And you know, when you say to me that you know, when you pay money for consultants to do a professional job, well, you expect them to do it properly. I expect PwC to have done this review properly, and so when they make a clear recommendation that retendering this process would likely see an increase in cost, or perhaps the hospital not being built at all, then I think we have to take note of that, and that's what we're doing. The other failings that are clearly pointed to in this report, the government isn't going to shy away from. And we will change procedures on the back of this to make sure that the mistakes that were made, primarily around the underestimation of cost, and as someone who's been involved in the building industry, you'll understand the failings that happened there. There should have been red flags earlier in the system during this process that highlighted the fact that there was clear failings in the estimate of costs. But when they were flagged, the Minister responded by wanting more detail. That was at the end of last summer. When he got that more detail, he came to Cabinet with a series of choices for the government to make. And I believe that when you read this report, the choice that we made in December was the right choice to move ahead with this project, even though it was clearly going to cost a lot more. Deputy, would you listen to it? You don't seem to be interested in answers. You just want to try and push yourself into every story. So I'd suggest maybe you read the report. I'd say you haven't probably even done that.
Don't confuse you with the facts,
Yeah, we have a serious project here, Deputy, that this government is determined to deliver. Mistakes were made in relation to both the tendering process and the estimate process that gave essentially a false picture of what this was going to cost. We now need to ensure that this project concludes in a way that doesn't see a significant increase of cost beyond where we are today. And I think that the work that both Mr Harris and in particular Minister Donoghue will be doing in the next month will set about ensuring that that's the case.
Deputy Wallace.
Tánaiste, I don't accept that PwC are in a position, and I don't see the evidence in the report as to why this shouldn't be revisited. They have not given us the evidence. They have not done that work. They were not the people to review this. And they addressed the peer review issue. Right? They said an external perspective, frequently in the form of a peer review, is often needed to help identify potential weaknesses and to provide assurances to the various levels of governance. Tánaiste, that translates to people on the board didn't have the competency to mark the design team. Who made the decision that there wasn't to be a peer review team? Who made that? We need to know. Tánaiste, you say there's a gross underestimate that should have been flagged earlier. Do you know, public benchmarking, Tánaiste, is an advanced estimation of what works would cost. I put in a question as to was there public benchmarking done. The answer came back and told me no construction benchmarking exercise were carried out prior to the issue of tenders in 2016. That's unheard of for a project like this. Why? Who made that decision? Is anyone going to be held to account, Taoiseach? Or Tánaiste? I don't understand that. And listen, I got the spend of the advisors on this project from 2013 to 2019. The quantity surveyors, Bruce Shaw, got 9.9 million. What were they doing? Robert Watt came into the PAC and he said, we were given commitments relating to the approximate bill of quantities that underpinned the contract and how accurate they were. They did not turn out to be accurate. Who gave the commitments? How come no one has answered these questions? Listen, the bill of quantities, Tánaiste, for the second stage was based on a preliminary design. That's nuts in the industry. You don't do that in the engineering industry. It's supposed to be based on a detailed design. That's unheard of. Who made that decision? Were the board competent? Was the legal advice good? Was the legal advice wrong? Are they going to be held to account? McCann Fitzgerald's? Listen, Tánaiste, listen, it must be thanking your stars that the world is exercised by 100,000 down in committee. We give these fellows 450,000 not to review this report, review this issue as far as I'm concerned, and we're looking at a loss of around 500 million here if you don't revisit it. And Tánaiste, I am convinced it can be done for a lot less. And the biggest problem here now is that we don't know where the price is going. It's at a certain price at the moment. It won't stop close to it. If this goes above 2.05, it will be the most expensive hospital ever built in the world. It doesn't make any sense, Tánaiste, not to revisit it. Thanks.
Tánaiste.
David, I mean, you keep saying in this House that we should be retendering here and we'll save a fortune. You know, I don't see the evidence to back that up. We have a report that was only published yesterday. We now will have a focus on putting a plan together to deliver on the recommendations of that report. A lot of the questions that you've asked are perfectly valid questions in relation to how the design team got this so badly wrong, which includes you know, some of the companies that you've referred to. And I think the recommendation in the report of the need to have a robust challenging of design teams and stakeholders in projects like this on an ongoing basis through a project delivery is something that we need to factor into to the future management of projects and indeed tendering. And that's what's going to happen now in the next month as we look to put a plan together to deliver on the recommendations of this report. But I mean, a lot of the issues that you are frustrated by are real and genuine. A lot of them are consistent with what PwC have pointed to in this report. The question is now how the government responds to that to make sure that we learn the lessons.